friends, David Lightbringer here to talk about Alicent Hightower. And by the way, I hope you like my commissioned 3D Hightower, the wonderful artist Criston Biswas made for me and for all of us, really, because, we needed one. I'll be off camera again today because my roommate's getting ready for a trip and this was just the easiest way to shoot the video. But yeah, Alicent Hightower is fast becoming my favorite character on House of the Dragon, I have to say, and not favorite in a I approve of her actions or a I agree with her decision-making kind of way, but more in that way that, we have to love all of our beautifully disastrous House of the Dragon characters. And by the way, I did not have artist Criston Biswas build the Hightower because I am Team Green. I had him build the Hightower because it's really cool and it sits on a few stone fortress and Euron's going to do all kinds of dark magic there in the Winds of Winter. But anyways, it is nice to have it for reference when we talk about Alicent Hightower, who has been probably, after Rhaenyra, the most talked about character on the show from the start. And then, not 10 minutes into episode 1 of season 2, we find out that, she's been getting serviced by the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, who apparently no longer has an issue being the sexual plaything of a queen or princess. He, of course, used the W word when rejecting the idea of still being able to sleep with Rhaenyra after she married Laenor. And though we, of course, don't have foul potty mouths like Sir Criston and won't use the W word, but yeah, Criston is allowing Alicent to sleep with him on the side, or whatever you want to call it, and that only exposes the falseness of his righteous indignation in that conversation with Rhaenyra back in, I think it was episode 4, but we'll get to Sir Criston in a moment. Alicent, well, almost any discussion of Alicent quickly falls into the realm of either judging her actions or defending them. And that's actually true for all the characters in this story, simply because stories, by their nature, try to get you to connect with and sympathize with the characters. And the characters in this story are all making potentially bad decisions. Alicent, in particular, though, has just really been a flashpoint of fan opinion and conversation. And not just because Olivia Cooke is so incredibly hot and classy. No, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the character, and of course Olivia's performance is incredible in all seriousness, and that does add to the compelling nature of the character. But I think Alicent's character, as fleshed out on the show, is compelling for a few key reasons, again beyond Olivia Cooke's acting and fabulousness. And I swear I'm not a Team Green. I swear I just enjoy the characters. I'm going to keep saying that. So first of all, Alicent is compelling because of the lens that she provides into Westerosi society. Being a highborn woman who is thrust into the center of the Game of Thrones at an early age without much, if any, agency, and who gradually increases her agency as she gets older and more experienced. So I think at various stages of her life, Alicent is comparable to characters like Sansa, Marjorie, Cersei, Arianne, Lyanna, people like that. These kind of characters are interesting to talk about because as women in a quasi-medieval society, they are clearly struggling against all kinds of societal repression, which makes them underdog characters. Those are always fun to root for. But because these are highborn women, they have the potential to gain agency and power and work their way into better situations and even affect the world around them. Queen Alysanne did this with soft power, mostly, and Daenerys did this, with dragon power. And then on House of the Dragon, we see Alicent and Rhaenyra wrestling with this, and they are obviously contrasted with one another. Or you might even say that Alicent is something of a foil for Rhaenyra in that she's not the heir to the throne and not a dragon rider. And I think one of the most compelling things about the show has been watching the different ways in which Alicent and Rhaenyra have tried to gain agency and power. Like any other character on the show, we might not always agree with their choices, but we certainly do understand their basic plight and the need to do something in order to have any sort of control or say over their own lives and the world they live in. And that's what makes discussing their choices such an emotionally immersive endeavor at times, if you know what I'm saying. I think the other reason why Alicent really kind of just leaps off the screen is because of her archetype and its familiarity to us. And I'm not talking about the evil stepmother thing. That's not what I mean. And this may depend somewhat on what country you're watching the show from, but here in the United States, I feel like everyone knows someone like Alicent. She's religious and culturally traditional, sure, and certainly a rule follower and a rule enforcer. But what I mean specifically is the archetype of someone who does a kind of performative righteousness, usually motivated by a deep internal sense of shame or guilt. Certainly, a lot of people who do that do look and feel just like Alicent. The vibe is like a mix of repressed authoritarian nun and, Karen. But I also want to point out that, of course, all types of people do performative morality and self-righteousness motivated by a deep sense of internal shame or guilt. For example, take Alicent's secret lover, Sir Criston Cole. That white cloak that he's gotten so comfortable taking on and off is literally his cloak of self-righteousness, as well as being his symbolic cloak of self-righteousness. And all his withering criticisms of Rhaenyra are very obviously exposed now as being deeply and thoroughly hypocritical and self-serving. And in terms of modern society, performative righteousness obviously exists on all sides of the political spectrum and the cultural spectrum, and it seems to be more popular than ever. I just happen to be more familiar with the strict church lady brand of self-righteousness simply because where I grew up, so Alicent feels very, very familiar to me. Very familiar. And I bet that's true for a lot of people watching the show. The point is that performative righteousness people almost always have a secret sin, or at least a secret sense of shame that makes them feel like a sinner. I joked on the live reaction stream that Alicent's version of live, laugh, love is probably something like bathe, pray, sin, because that seems to be her routine, round and round, over and over. We can't do this anymore, she says to Criston, who knows that they will, and there never seems to be enough baths to make Alicent feel clean. She's going to try the lake, apparently. Maybe that's a big enough bath. Anyway, it's not really about whether we consider her affair with Criston as a sin, but about the fact that she clearly does. From our modern perspective, there's basically nothing wrong with the situation, save for the fact that it's a political liability and, sort of undermines the security of the Red Keep when you've promoted your boy toy to Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, who is in fact in charge of the safety and security of the entire royal family. But Alicent isn't married anymore, so whatever. We're not here to pass moral judgment on consenting adults having various forms of sex behind closed doors, which should be locked, but for Alicent, internally, she is clearly shamed by her secret. Some of this may be for the reasons I just stated, meaning that she feels guilty because she knows she's taking a risk that could endanger the unity of Team Green right in the middle of a civil war. But I'm guessing more of the guilt comes from the fact that she was taught to, repress her desires all of her life. Sexual desires specifically, yes, but also any sort of desire for a life that isn't in service to House Hightower and her father's schemes. And so now she can only think about giving into desire as being an act of wickedness. And that's how this essay is going to go, by the way. Not a ton of structure. I'm just going to cook for a little bit, then move on, cook some more. And yes, those are Olivia Cook jokes. So in the end, and this is the thing I found far more surprising than the mere fact of her affair with Criston, the rolling ball of contradictions that is Alicent Hightower ends up being actually hilarious. Something about getting this secret camera-like view of her just reclining like a queen while the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard works so very hard to please her just kind of breaks all the tension with this character and allows us to find the unintentional humor in her hypocrisy. It always smelled like hypocrisy and self-righteousness, but now that we know that she's not so perfect after all, but just a filthy sinner like the rest of us, just kind of loses its edge. We don't take her pronouncements and denouncements quite as seriously now. In fact, they're about as serious as when Criston Cole starts calling Rhaenyra names. And that makes Alicent funny. At times, anyway. Like when she says, we can't do this anymore. And Criston is like, yeah, sure, whatever. Now, can you fasten my cloak back on? We got to get to that meeting, and I need help with this. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but I think that's more or less what they said.
All right, Dave, I'll be seeing you. I'm off on my trip.
Oh, hey, Rhaegar. Where are you headed?
Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Santa Fe, huh?
Yes, I got a very special invite to a very special party thrown by a world-famous author.
Really? Was his name George, by chance?
I'm sorry, Dave. I wish I could say more.
Okay, Rhaegar, whatever you say. Did a package come for me today?
No, I don't think so.
That's weird, because it says that it was delivered.
Well, that is strange.
Yeah, it's from Magic Spoon. They're sending me the new cinnamon roll flavor, and
Yes, well, I've really got to be going, Dave.
Hey, that isn't a box of cereal under your shirt by chance, is it?
I don't know what you mean.
Come on, man, I can see it right there.
Okay, yes. I did intercept your package of Magic Spoon cereal and treat bars in an attempt to smuggle them out of your house without your consent.
Hey, that's my cinnamon roll.
Yes, Dave, it's absolutely delicious. That's why I was stealing it.
And what about the rest of my order?
Oh, that.
Open up the suitcase, Rhaegar.
Well, this didn't happen on any of the trial runs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I suppose this is what you're looking for here.
Rhaegar!
Look, Dave, the only thing I can really say in my defense is that with 0 grams of sugar, 4 to 5 grams of net carbs in each serving, and 13 to 14 grams of protein, Magic Spoon really is cereal reinvented. Plus, as everyone knows, I'm a sucker for nostalgia. Magic Spoon really does deliver the great tastes of my childhood with grown-up ingredients and no artificial flavors or dyes.
Well, yeah, we all know that, but why do you need so much cereal to go to some author's fancy party?
Well, Dave, the truth is I don't have an invitation, and I don't even know if there is a party. That's just a rumor I heard online. But I thought I would just, roll up with a bunch of cereal and try to make something happen.
Rhaegar, you're absurd. Now, can you please finish this commercial so I can at least enjoy my newly repossessed bowl of cinnamon roll?
No problem, Dave. Friends, to get your hands on some Magic Spoon today with an extra $5 off your order, simply scan the QR code on the screen and use code Lightbringer, or visit magicspoon.com/Lightbringer, linked below the video. Thanks to Magic Spoon for sponsoring House of the Dragon content. And now, back to the video.
So yeah, Alicent is funny, just like that commercial you just watched all of, and thank you for that. Yet at other times, Alicent remains a deeply tragic and sympathetic figure, such as when she's trying to bathe and realizes she's now completely surrounded by people who work for Larys and suddenly can't bear to have them around, with the touches of their washcloths and hands feeling like an extension of Larys' spider-like spider appendages. I forget what they're called. Are they just legs? Or is there a special spider word? Anyway, yeah, it feels like Larys is in the room with her, and that scene creeps us out along with Alicent and makes us feel her disgust and discomfort. And then, of course, when we see her with Criston Cole, we are also very mindful of the fact that the only other 2 sexual relationships that we've seen her have, her marriage to King Viserys and her exploitation by Lord Larys, were not of her choosing and were not at all loving or sexy or beautiful in any way. Part of us is happy for her, at least I was, that she's found a bit of sexual pleasure, or that she's simply found a way to seek any kind of personal pleasure or desire at all. I mean, good for her, right? Life is short. Everyone should get to recline like a queen and, okay, well, you get the idea. And speaking of seeking pleasure, late breaking news as I record this, in an interview with Elle magazine, Olivia Cooke revealed that she somewhat disagreed with showrunner Ryan Condal when he decided to cut one of her sex scenes from season 2. The intimate scene was, quote, carnal and even, quote, animalistic, according to Cooke. She says, it was messy as f***. It wasn't beautiful, and that was really fun to do. I think Ryan said we weren't learning any more about the characters, which I disagree with slightly, but it's okay. It's his show. To which I say, Ryan Condal, if you're listening, we need to learn as much as we can about Alicent Hightower, okay? Now, unfortunately, this episode outlined its theme early on, in typical Song of Ice and Fire fashion, as being the conflict between duty and desire. And that essentially reaches a climax when her and Criston are once again engaging in their affair when the blood and cheese murder takes place. And just to be clear, Criston probably wouldn't have been the one in charge of guarding Helena's room, but as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, he is definitely in charge of overseeing the security and safety of the entire royal family. Just check out any of the Jaime chapters in Storm, Feast, or Dance, where he's, very much in charge of the security of the Red Keep. So it is definitely Sir Criston's fault and responsibility that there weren't guards posted close enough to help Helena and poor little Jaehaerys. Alicent should be mindful of this, and so will rightfully feel, even more guilty now after the death of her grandson. I wouldn't say that it's her fault, per se. However, her affair with Criston was a contributing factor, and that's probably why the scene was written the way it was. As many of you will know, in the book version of the Blood and Cheese murder, Alicent is in the room with Helena, bound and gagged and forced to watch all of the horror. It's one of the things that makes it so twisted. And the writers, they've chosen to replace that direct trauma with a more indirect one. So Alicent will now feel guilty by her absence and guilty about her affair instead of simply reeling in abject horror and PTSD for, weeks and weeks. So I think this change actually suits Alicent's character arc better. But let me know what you think in the comments. And let me know if I changed your mind about any of that too, because I know a lot of people didn't like various aspects of Blood and Cheese. But I thought that Alicent sleeping with Criston in that moment was kind of perfect. So as my friend Girl Nuddles observed on our live reaction show last week, there's definitely a weird love triangle going on, or maybe you'd call it a love-hate triangle with Criston, Rhaenyra, Rhaenyra and Alicent. And that goes way beyond the fact that Alicent is sleeping with Criston in the same room that Rhaenyra slept with him in, since Alicent was moved into Rhaenyra's old rooms. That physical parallel really just invites us to compare the psychology of the two affairs, so let's do that. As you remember, Rhaenyra slept with Criston on the same night that Daemon took her out for a night in Flea Bottom that ultimately ended with him abandoning her in a brothel. Then, aroused but deserted, Rhaenyra finds a safer and more devoted, or you might even say subservient lover. Someone who was sworn to protect her and remain at her side. Someone whom she had known for years and grown comfortable with. And someone who would have motivation to keep everything a secret because he's a Kingsguard and he's not supposed to be doing this. She was back in the comfort of her own room instead of a flea bottom brothel that she's never been in. And although it was, of course, entirely inappropriate for her to do this, she took the lead in the situation with Criston because there, she was the more powerful person. Whereas with Daemon in the brothel, she had just been disempowered and made to feel unsafe. So it's a very similar dynamic with Alicent, who also finds Criston to be a safe, yet obviously attractive, option for discreet sexual pleasure. Cole contrasts with the men who want to use her, like Larys, and Cole seemingly won't abandon her. He's sworn to serve her and also owes his continued position to her favor. Now, I'm not saying Criston is like the epitome of unselfish love or anything, far from it. It's just that his ulterior motives are internal as opposed to political, because Criston sees Rhaenyra and then Alicent as a kind of validation of his own worth. Whereas someone like Larys is using her, to basically get off on power and to actually gain political control. I just mentioned Daemon abandoning Rhaenyra, and to be honest, once I sat down to think about it, Alicent would actually have a towering sense of abandonment with foundations so deep that it would be a fundamental part of her personality. And forgive me for using the Hightower in any possible context, even a metaphorical one. Yes, it's the towering sense of abandonment. Because think about it, her mother died at an early age, and then her dad treats her as a political tool. Basically, as soon as she hit puberty, her dad started suggesting that she might wear your mother's dresses to go seduce the king. That's the exact opposite of protecting her. And again, her mother or any other significant female role model is nowhere to be found to help her. It's not her mom's fault, she's dead, but yeah, there's no one around. Then we have Viserys, who didn't protect Alicent and didn't protect her son when he had his eye put out by another family member, which is something we know Alicent remembers damn well because she brought it up in this episode. In other words, basically no one has ever protected Alicent or looked out for her, ever, until Criston Cole. Is this relationship starting to make sense to you yet? It sure makes sense to me. Criston is big and strong and totally devoted to Alicent, and he wears the trappings of purity and honor as a daily costume. His station requires him to put aside all but service to the royal family, so he's literally just standing there with nothing to do but what Alicent tells him. And we can see clearly what she tells him to do, at least sometimes. But we can't do this again, you understand. That must surely be confusing since it was basically just Criston servicing Alicent, but sure, okay, whatever you say, we can't do this again. Another reason Alicent finds this affair with Criston satisfying, even with the guilt that comes along with it, is that she's the boss. She's in control. Just as no one has ever looked out for her, she's never really had much control of her life, despite enjoying a certain amount of privilege. And now that she has carried out her grand purpose, given to her by her father, of placing Aegon on the throne, she's kind of done in terms of you only had one job. She did that, and now all that's left is to try to help guide her son's rule as best she can. But since she has little actual power, that boils down to just trying to get Aegon to listen to her. And guess what? Trying to get Aegon to listen to your advice just became the official sport of the Red Keep. Now, I predicted this exact phenomenon in my Team Green is a mess video, but no one cares about that. The point is, it's obvious that with a young and inexperienced king like Aegon, all the more experienced people, who, by the way, have vested interests in his decisions, are going to, hey, Aegon, looking sharp today, buddy. So I was thinking your dad was, kind of a weak king, and you don't want to be like that, do you? And gosh, wasn't Otto your father's hand? Man, seems like maybe you should, pick one yourself. And that sort of thing. We also saw Aemond and Criston holding the smallest council meeting on the side, which then got busted up by Otto. And again, I say Team Green internal politics are freaking hysterical. I died laughing so hard during this episode. And another thing that was was kind of amusing is the fact that her and Otto are now in a similar boat politically. Their main powers are now the powers of persuasion, manipulation, leveraging, and those sorts of things. Maybe a guilt trip or two, maybe a little divide and conquer tactics, such as when Otto started in with Aemond after busting up the smallest council meeting about how you know your brother Aegon can't control his impulses. Because basically Otto was seeing Aemond and Aegon starting to form a power block that will oppose him, and he had to do something about that. So Otto and Alicent are now riding the tiger that they let loose and made king. And it's kind of amusing to see them identifying their similar positions and discussing how best to try to steer Aegon's course. In any case, if you can't make your children do what you want, you can make the Kingsguard do what you want. I think that's the lesson here. So the last thing that we have to talk about is Alicent's new affair relationship with Sir Himbo of the Kingsguard in relation to Lord Larys Strong. Another unintentionally funny moment in this episode was when Larys is all, "Gee, I came by to visit you in your chambers, but your maids said you were indisposed." And I just found that confusing because, usually I get whatever I want. And gosh, you weren't having a moment of privacy, were you? You know how much that bothers me. It was funny because all of a sudden Alicent is in the middle of two guys competing over her, sort of. It sort of feels like that. But of course, it's also creepy and possessive, and we recognize that soft tone of voice that Larys uses as his murder voice. And yes, he does use that voice all the time, but he's always ready to murder. That's the point. So what I'm trying to say is, does Criston know that Larys has been sexually extorting Alicent? If he doesn't know, which he probably doesn't, will he find out? And flipping that around, does Larys know that Alicent is sleeping with Criston? And if not, will he find out? Because honestly, either one of those things could lead to a bit of murder. Larys, after all, is absolutely the type of person to, slowly torture someone for 2 weeks, simply for interfering with anything that he considers his. And Criston is very obviously the type of person to simply smash someone's face in if they give him, even the slightest excuse. This is the man who slammed old Lord Beesbury's head into the stone table, or into the little round stone thing on the stone table, and then drew his sword on his own Lord Commander because he perceived a slight to Alicent or something. Maybe it's because he's a boiling cauldron of rage who feels powerless in his own way, his life being lived more or less at the mercy of the highborn. But yeah, I think we can assume that he has no idea about Larys' extortion of Alicent, or Larys would probably already be a dead man. Which is, by the way, one of the questions that I've been raising since last season in regards to Alicent being exploited by Larys. Yes, Larys is definitely blackmailing Alicent against revealing his crimes by making her complicit in his crimes, but nothing is stopping her from just, sending Criston Cole to Larys' chambers to beat him to death in the middle of the night. I mean, who's going to do anything about it? Larys is the last official Strong alive, and he's not exactly popular, right? He's a creepo and the master of whisperers, which everyone knows means torture and spying and the black cells and all that. So the fact that Alicent has not done this shows you that despite how uncomfortable the situation is, she does feel that she needs the information/political power that Larys offers. So no, Alicent can't be let off the hook entirely for, say, agreeing to take off her socks and letting Larys jerk it to her feet in payment for his firebombing of Mysaria's house. She did choose to do that when given the choice. And she continues to keep him around instead of, sending Criston Cole to his chamber at night because Larys is an avenue to power and control that is seemingly outside of Otto's reach. So what I'm wondering is if Alicent might start thinking about, the Criston Cole personal makeover option for Larys, since we can see that she's feeling increasingly creeped out by him and may be starting to question the wisdom of having him replace all of her maids and servants. And if Larys doesn't yet know about Criston and Alicent, it can't be long before he does. I mean, these guys don't even lock the door when they bang, after all. And I guarantee that Larys will take personal offense at both Alicent having a will of her own and at Criston receiving Alicent's sexual attention, which Larys was trying to monopolize. So yeah, some of this drama will be coming soon to a home theater near you. In the wake of the Blood and Cheese murder, expect Larys and Criston to both be asked some pretty hard questions, and also to be asking some hard questions. After all, both men are partly at fault for this failure of intelligence and security, and both men will likely look to shift the blame onto someone else, with that someone else else, no doubt being the subject of extreme violence and cruelty. I also kind of wonder what Aegon will think when he learns of Alicent's affair with Sir Criston, as he surely will. I'm guessing he will further lose respect for Alicent and will listen to her even less, even while he's promoting Criston himself to Hand of the King. That just seems like the kind of misogynistic response that Aegon will serve up, especially in the throes of extreme grief and rage. Said another way, the older generation will certainly have a harder time keeping Aegon on the leash now, which is something that I predicted, and I know no one cares, but I did predict this in my Aegon Unleashed video, which is still a good watch, by the way, if you're in the mood for some exploration of Aegon's character. Having now seen the first episode of Season 2, I think I tuned in to the right issues in that one. And look, just so you don't think I'm tooting my horn too much, I also predicted that the Pact of Ice and Fire would be this big thing at Winterfell, and they didn't even mention it, so you know. You win some, you lose some. In any case, I'm enjoying watching Olivia Cook's performance as Alicent immensely, even more than last season. I know a lot of people have all kinds of feelings about how they're developing the character, but I myself think they're doing a masterful job. I think Alicent is a character that people will remember and think about and talk about for years and years and years, and her story isn't even close to done yet. So that's it, guys. Thanks very much for watching. Please do come join me and Tim and Nettles for the live reaction after the episode next week. We run lots of fan polls and read lots of comments, so it's a great place to come and give your take after the episode. So cheers, thanks, and go buy some cereal.